On the night of the 3rd of December 1779, the Drury Lane Theatre in London staged a royal command performance of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. In the royal box sat a 17-year-old boy who would one day become King George IV of England. On the stage, in the role of a princess disguised as a shepherdess, stood a 21-year-old actress with dark auburn hair, blue eyes, and a face that the painter Joshua Reynolds would call the most perfect of his generation. Her name was Mary Robinson. Within 4 days, the Prince of Wales had declared her the greatest and most perfect beauty of her sex. Within 6 months, she was his lover. Within a year, he had abandoned her. And within 5 years, the most painted woman in London, the woman every portraitist in England wanted on his canvas, was paralysed, in debt, and the most savagely mocked figure on the front pages of the British press. She had 18 years left to live. What she did with those 18 years would change the course of English literature. This is the story of Mary Robinson, the actress who became a king's mistress, and the writer who outlived him in everything that mattered. Mary Darby was born in Bristol on the 27th of November 1757, the daughter of a merchant sea captain named Nicholas Darby. When Mary was 7 years old, her father left England to start a whaling station in Labrador, Canada. He took his mistress with him. The business failed. The family lost their home. Her parents separated. Her mother moved the children to London and began running a small school for girls in Chelsea. Mary was educated at a school in Bristol run by Hannah More, one of the most famous female intellectuals in Georgian England. By 15, she had been introduced to David Garrick, the greatest actor of the 18th century, who agreed to coach her for the stage. Before her career could begin, she was persuaded to marry. His name was Thomas Robinson. He was a young legal clerk. He had told her family he was the heir to a great Welsh estate. He was not. Within months of the wedding, Mary Robinson was pregnant. Within a year, her husband had been arrested for debt. Mary spent the next 15 months living in the Fleet Debtors' Prison in London with her infant daughter while her husband served his sentence. It was there, inside the prison, that Mary published her first book of poetry. The Duchess of Devonshire, Georgiana Cavendish, became her patron. She bought a copy. She championed Mary in society. And when the Robinsons were released from prison, Mary went straight back to David Garrick and told him she was finally ready to act. On the 10th of December 1776, Mary Robinson made her London stage debut. She played Juliet at Drury Lane. She was 18 years old. The London papers called her a sensation. For the next 3 years, she played Ophelia, Rosalind, Lady Macbeth, Imogen. She became one of the most famous young actresses on the London stage. Sheridan adored her. Garrick coached her personally. And then, on the 3rd of December 1779, she walked out onto the Drury Lane stage to play Perdita, a princess disguised as a shepherdess in the play that would change her life. The Prince of Wales watched her from the royal box. He was 17 years old, sheltered, bored, the most spoiled boy in England. He had never been allowed to choose a single thing in his own life. By the end of the performance, he had decided he would have Mary Robinson. Within 4 days, his first letter arrived. He signed it Florizel, the name of Perdita's lover in the play. Mary kept the correspondence in character. She signed her replies Perdita. For nearly 6 months they wrote to each other in secret. Hundreds of letters passed between them through intermediaries. He sent her a portrait of himself painted in miniature, set in diamonds. Folded inside the case was a piece of paper cut into the shape of a heart on which he had written a declaration of undying love. Mary refused to meet him. She was married. She had a daughter. She was at the peak of her acting career. So he made her an offer. On his 21st birthday, when he would come of age and inherit his fortune, he would pay her a bond of £20,000, the equivalent of more than £2 million today, if she would leave her career, leave her husband, and become his mistress. She accepted. On the 31st of May, 1780, Mary Robinson gave her last performance on the London stage. She was 22 years old. She walked away from the most successful acting career in England. For the next 18 months, she lived as the prince's lover. He sent her gifts. He paraded her through Hyde Park in carriages with matched chestnut ponies and liveried servants. London society called her the Princess of Wales in everything but title. Then, in December of 1780, a new woman caught the prince's eye. When his coming of age finally arrived, he received from Parliament the equivalent of £3 million in modern money to pay off his debts and another £6.5 million in annual income. He did not pay Mary Robinson a single penny of the £20,000 he had promised her. She was 23 years old. She was £7,000 in debt, and she had given up her career for a boy who would not even open her letters. The press destroyed her. In a single year, Mary Robinson became the most savagely caricatured woman in England. Cartoonists drew her as a prostitute, a witch, a fortune hunter. The papers printed letters that mocked her down to her hairstyle, her carriage, her walk. Her husband had vanished. Her child was 9. She had no income, no career, and no royal protection. The new king's friend, Charles James Fox, the famous Whig politician, visited her on the prince's behalf. He offered her £5,000 in exchange for surrendering the prince's letters and giving up the £20,000 bond entirely. Mary, ruined, accepted. The next year, she fell in love with a war hero named Colonel Bannister Tarleton, who had become famous for fighting against the Americans in the Revolutionary War. They began a relationship that would last 15 years. In 1883, while Mary was pregnant with Tarleton's child, she traveled to Dover in a freezing post-chaise to try to stop him from being sent abroad by his family. She lost the baby in transit. The journey, the trauma, and the inexperience of the midwife who attended her left her, at the age of 26, paralyzed from the waist down. She would never walk again. For the rest of her life, she had to be lifted, wheeled, and carried. And here is the part of the story almost nobody knows. She decided she would write her way out of it. From a wheelchair, Mary Robinson became one of the most prolific writers of the late 18th century. In 18 years, she wrote 8 novels, 3 plays, pamphlets, political essays, translations, a memoir, and 14 volumes of poetry. She became friends with Mary Wollstonecraft, the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. She became friends with William Godwin. She became friends with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the poet who would write Kubla Khan. In 1809, she published A Letter to the Women of England on the Injustice of Mental Subordination, one of the most important early feminist works in English literature, written 1 year before her death. In 1800, she published her final book, a collection of poems called Lyrical Tales. It was a brilliant, sharp response to Wordsworth and Coleridge's lyrical ballads, and it proved she could match the greatest poets of her era, line for line. Coleridge sent her the secret first draft of Kubla Khan 16 years before he published it. He said she was a woman of undoubted genius. He had never said that about anyone else. The press still called her Perdita. The cartoonists still mocked her. The boy who had promised her £20,000 had become king. But Mary Robinson had stopped caring what the papers wrote about her. She had become a poet. Mary Robinson died on the 26th of December, 1800. She had been called the most beautiful woman in England. She had been the first public mistress of a king. She had been ruined, mocked, paralyzed, and bankrupted, and she had become, in her last years, one of the greatest poets of the English Romantic age. She is buried in a small churchyard in Old Windsor, yards from the castle of the king whose son had abandoned her. Today, Mary Robinson is being rediscovered. The actress whose name London tried to bury is now remembered as one of the first poets of the English Romantic age. The woman who lost everything kept the only thing that mattered, her voice.